Hello everyone, and welcome to this Diablo 3 tips video for playing the Crusader Aegis of Valor set. This video contains some insights I picked up after playing with the set for several hours. We'll go over 10 different things that will hopefully help you improve your gameplay and allow you to more consistently complete higher level greater rifts. First up, let's take a quick look at the gearing. There are 3 items that provide damage multipliers to the main damage dealing skill, Heaven's Fury. Make sure you get all 3 of these to maximize your damage output. Cooldown reduction is vital to help ensure you can keep the Akarat's champion buff up at all times, so equip these items to gain some significant cooldown benefits. And then with the remaining selections, there is a heavy emphasis on toughness. You'll need many of these items to have enough defense to survive in higher level greater rifts. And next, let's take a look at the skills. Both Fist of the Heavens and Heaven's Fury are required to benefit from the set bonuses. Akarat's champion provides several benefits, and you'll want to keep this buff active as much as possible. The rune choice for Laws of Valor is important to help you benefit from the damage reduction tied to the Achillocuros legendary power in the Captain Crimson set. The Long Arm of the Law passive skill will help you keep these buffs active virtually permanently. Equipping a Hellfire amulet will allow you to obtain a 5th passive skill. In this build, we use Finery as the 5th passive. And now for the tips. Tip number 1 is to be aware of your defensive ramp up. This build relies heavily on multiple defensive buffs, some of which need to be refreshed constantly while you fight. Without them, you can take a tremendous amount of damage very quickly, so you won't want to engage enemies until you've got them up. There will be times when your toughness buffs won't be active, such as at the start of a rift, when you enter a new level, if your buffs drop after running a long distance, or when you're coming back to life after an untimely death. In these moments, before you begin going toe-to-toe with monsters, you'll want to focus on the following abilities. First, cast Laws of Valor. With the Captain Crimson set equipped, the reduced resource cost of the Unstoppable Force rune will translate to a significant damage reduction bonus. Next, with monsters at a distance, cast Fist of the Heavens 2 or 3 times on enemies to gain stacks of the Aegis of Heaven buff, which is rewarded from the 4-piece set bonus. You'll want to get to the maximum count of 50 stacks on the buff. And then cast Akarat's Champion for yet another significant damage reduction bonus. These skills don't have to be cast in this specific sequence, but this is generally a good approach to follow. Be extremely mindful when traversing maps, keeping an eye on all of these cooldowns to ensure you get them active again before you engage new enemies. Also keep in mind that if you jump into the fray too soon, you might unnecessarily waste your cheat death procs, both from your follower and more importantly from the Akarat's Champion skill itself. Triggering the Akarat's Champion cheat death proc will remove the buff completely, and if you lose the buff like this shortly after you cast the skill, then you'll have to wait for its long cooldown to reset before you can once again benefit from the skill's bonuses. Once you've ramped up your defenses and begin combat, you'll of course want to maintain these buffs, but none more so than Akarat's Champion, which provides significant bonuses to damage output, toughness, wrath generation, and crowd control immunity. The skill has a 90-second base cooldown, so you'll want to ensure you have plenty of cooldown reduction on your gear properties. Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac is also a vital piece in helping to reset the buff's cooldown. You'll need to keep an eye on both the skill's duration timer and its cooldown timer. If the buff duration will expire before the cooldown is reset, then leverage the Iron Skin skill to bridge the gap until you can cast Akarat's Champion again. Remember that you can't do damage if you don't have the toughness to stand in there and take the hits. The next tip is to bob and weave while you're fighting. Depending on your specific variation of the build, particularly if you choose more offensive related gear pieces in lieu of defensive ones, you'll want to stay on the move to avoid taking unnecessary damage. If you don't have enough cooldown reduction to keep Akarat's Champion up at all times, then you may need to spend some time running around grouping up enemies while you wait for its cooldown to reset, before you can stand still and dish out damage again. Move around to pick up health globes and find better positions to stand away from enemy affixes. If you have the Convention of Elements ring equipped, then you should also spend time grouping up enemies while you wait on the ring's holy cycle. It may sound counterintuitive since this character is a sword and board type character, but you won't necessarily be able to stand in the middle of a pack and constantly take tons of damage. Don't be afraid to stay on the move until you can get healed up or reactivate your toughness buffs. This build doesn't have great mobility. It's easy for you to get trapped in a group of monsters, or with your back up against the wall or in a corner as you kite monsters around, where elite affixes can overwhelm you. Some affixes like Arcane Sentry can be tough to circumvent if you need to run back through a monster pack to escape. Your only mobility skill is via the Flash rune of the Iron Skin skill, which allows you to move unhindered through enemies, so use it to your advantage. Be proactive with your positioning and make sure you're thinking a step ahead, knowing how easy it is for you to get stuck. Don't allow yourself to unnecessarily get trapped in an unfavorable position where you can't run past monsters. Note that when you have a shield pylon active, the iron skin buff won't get applied to you, so you won't be able to move unhindered through enemies. Be very careful with your positioning while under the effect of the shield pylons. Otherwise, you might get stuck having to fight an unfavorable or small pack of monsters that you would normally prefer to skip. The next tip is to make sure you keep your Wrath at maximum level. Among the several defensive items and abilities this build relies on is the Aquila Cuirass legendary power in Kanai's Cube, which provides yet another significant damage reduction bonus that is vital to survivability. The item requires you to stay above 90% of your primary resource, but both of your Wrath spinning abilities, Fist of the Heavens and Heaven's Fury, have relatively high resource cost, and you don't have a lot of base maximum Wrath to work with. To address this, make sure you assign 50 Paragon points into maximum Wrath on the Core Paragon tab, and also consider obtaining maximum Wrath on the secondary properties of gear pieces where possible. Then, obtain resource cost reduction on some of your gear pieces, such as the shoulders, gloves, and rings. Remember that resource cost reduction translates to extra toughness for you via the Captain Crimson set. While you're in combat with enemies, you'll want to make sure you cast Fist of the Heavens frequently to keep your Wrath topped off. Each enemy hit will grant Wrath via the 4-piece set bonus. Focus casting Fist of the Heavens on larger packs of monsters so you can maximize the amount of Wrath that's returned to you. You can monitor the Aquila Cuirass buff icon while you play to see if you have enough resource cost reduction to maintain the buff. If you see the buff periodically dropping off while you're in combat, try to make some adjustments to prevent this from happening. In addition to keeping Wrath maxed, you'll also want to frequently cast the Fist of the Heavens skill to maintain 3 stacks of the Aegis of Fury buff from the 2-piece set bonus. This is a vital damage multiplier for the Heaven's Fury skill, and any cast of Heaven's Fury without it is a wasted damage output opportunity. To maintain the buff, get into a groove of laying down 1 or 2 Fists of the Heavens and then blasting away with Heaven's Fury for about 5 consecutive casts. Then just repeat, continuing to cycle between these 2 skills. This build also relies on 3 key legendary powers to maximize the damage output of Heaven's Fury: Fate of the Fell, Bracer of Fury, and Shield of Fury. You'll want to obtain these items with legendary properties at the upper end of their range. Make sure Fate of the Fell is placed in Kanai's Cube, where you can inherently benefit from the maximum legendary power value. For Bracer of Fury, you'll want to find bracers with the legendary power value as close to maximum as possible, prioritizing the legendary power over the item's base stats. A non-ancient and non-optimum bracer with a high legendary power value can easily outshine a primal ancient item with perfect base stats, but with a legendary power on the low end of the range. And the same goes for Shield of Fury, but to a slightly lesser degree, since the legendary power range is tighter. The Heaven's Fury skill has a decent range and spread. Make sure to leverage this by staying on the edge of monster packs, facing across the battlefield, as the skill tooltip says. It can be a bit counterintuitive because you're a melee character, but you do have some range. It's not Demon Hunter range, but it is something. Also make sure you pay attention to the direction you're facing, because you can easily get skewed and cast in an unintended direction. Be aware that if your mouse cursor is hovering over an enemy that jumps behind you or off to the side, your character may turn and cast Heaven's Fury in a different direction, even if you don't move your mouse cursor. Watch for the Heaven's Fury beams and make sure you are pointing toward the monster packs to hit as many enemies as possible with each cast. This build has a lot going on, with many skills to manage. To help ease the mental burden of keeping track of everything at the same time, a good approach is to establish some of your skills on autopilot at a subconscious level. This will take some time to get used to, but the payoff is rewarding and will allow you to have an easier time playing with this set. With your skills set up on the hotkeys shown, use your left hand to hit the number 3 hotkey repeatedly. This will help maintain the vital toughness buffs associated with Laws of Valor and Aquila Cuirass. Occasionally hit the number 4 hotkey, Judgment, to benefit from its damage and toughness bonuses. Find a cadence where you're constantly just blindly hitting these 2 hotkeys. Don't worry about watching their cooldowns. With enough cooldown reduction, you will be able to cast these quite frequently. Similarly, follow the same basic process with the skills assigned to the left and right click slots, Fist of the Heavens and Heaven's Fury. As discussed previously, find a groove of casting 1 or 2 Fists of the Heavens, followed by 5 or so consecutive casts of Heaven's Fury. Then repeat. This should be enough to maintain your maximum Fury level and the 3-stack Aegis of Fury buff from the 2-piece set bonus. Once you get these 4 skills on autopilot, then you can focus most of your attention on maintaining the ever-important Akarat's champion buff as mentioned previously. You'll be able to mainly shift your eyesight back and forth between the play area and the Akarat's timer and cooldown duration indicators. Just use the Iron Skin skill to help fill any gaps when needed. Following this approach may not be the most efficient way to play this build, but it certainly makes things easier for the casual player. The last tip is to try out some of the variability this build has to offer. There are many viable alternatives for the build in skills, stats, and gear pieces. For example, you could use Shield Glare in lieu of Judgment to trigger the Bracer of Fury legendary power. You could opt for cooldown reduction in lieu of resource cost reduction if you're better at managing Wrath resource. You could use the Pig Sticker weapon in lieu of Echoing Fury. You could use Stone Gauntlets in lieu of Aquila Kuros and Kunai's Cube if you're proficient at managing Akarat's champion cooldown. Or you could use Illusory Boots in the cube to give you more maneuverability at the cost of lower toughness. You could also use the Endless Walk Jewelry set, the Traveler's Pledge, and the Compass Rose in lieu of the Unity Ring and Hellfire Amulet. Or you could go with the Convention of Elements Ring in lieu of Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac. This is a popular choice, offering superior damage output, but it does require a lot more work and focus to maintain the playstyle since you won't be able to keep all of your buffs active as frequently. There's a lot of viable combinations that can be used. So try them out, experiment, and see what works best for your playstyle. And there's 10 tips to help you improve your Crusader Valor's gameplay. Hopefully you learned something new. Let me know in the comments if you have any more good tips for playing this set that might help others out, and I look forward to seeing you at the next video. Thanks for watching.